Hi, friends. Hope you're doing much better today. Um, Flares come and go, and sometimes we have really good days, sometimes we have really bad days with fibromyalgia. And um, when we are experiencing those days with flares, a lot of times our emotions will also have some kind of flare in a way where our feelings of self-worth start to plummet because we're not accomplishing things. And I'm just wondering, do you find yourself to be in that place? And how often does depression affect your fibromyalgia? So, Um, I am going to be working on reading publications of doctors who have done studies on depression and fibromyalgia, and discussing these things with you that I'm finding. I have this article on the implication of shame in fibromyalgia and self-compassion and the differences that those two sides of the coin can have on fibromyalgia. So I'm continuing with the article. Um, the name of the article is Exploring the Role of Shame and Self-Compassion on the Link Between Fibromyalgia Symptoms and Depression, Insights from Mediation and Moderation Analysis. And it's a really long article, so my part one, I only got to maybe halfway through the article and I was exhausted. So I'm going to go through the rest of the article so that we can talk about uh, what their findings are. They were testing women with fibromyalgia and asking them questions. So their findings are based on the answers to these questions, and um, coming to find out that um, the differences that the feelings of self shame have compared to the feelings of self compassion. So I would like us to come up with a plan to encourage ourselves to be a little more compassionate towards our disability when fibromyalgia flares, and also our limitations when fibromyalgia is not flaring. We still have limitations, and to learn how to be gentle with ourselves, but still get the things done that we do want to get done. I think it's important to live our lives to the best of our abilities, and to always seek out answers to our many questions with fibromyalgia. Um, I guess fibromyalgia affects maybe 2% of the population of the world, somewhere around that. And among those with fibromyalgia, it fluctuates, I guess, a range of 25% to 45% of people with fibromyalgia experience varying degrees of depression. I know with me, it was a lot of self deprecation as well as spiraling, a symptom of depression where the thoughts keep getting worse and worse over the day as I thought more. Okay, interesting factoid. I would, anytime I had like feelings of anger, I would go through a cleaning tirade, which is weird because when you have fibromyalgia, you have days where you don't feel like doing that. But sometimes an emotion can bring upon some energy. And um, you know what, I would be angry over injustice. That is definitely a type of anger that can motivate you to, with a lot of energy to get things done. And then when I was cleaning, I had all these thoughts that would come up while I'm cleaning. Cleaning doesn't distract me. I'm not focused on really the cleaning part. I'm focused. I start focusing on what I'm thinking about, and it's interesting that uh, not having a different outlet for my emotions before, that would be my outlet, and that would be the time where I start talking to myself pretty much about everything I'm angry about. And depression is a form of anger. um, I would say that the anger is against the injustice of how we've been treated, and not understanding what we can do about those feelings that we're having. And so we suppress them because they're uncomfortable, and then it puts pressure on our moods and creates a depressive thought pattern and inability, so to speak, to get out of the cycle that we're stuck in. Um, So I'm going to read through the last paragraph I read on the last video so that we can kind of get a recap here. Shame has external and internal aspects referring to the source of unfavorable evaluations, that is, how one believes to be perceived by others versus how one perceives oneself. Shame typically involves negative social and self related judgments. Example of one as inferior and worthless, and others as critical and rejecting. Also, negative effect and defensive actions, for example, concealment or a positive self presentation. That sounds like masking. That's pretty common. Um, Despite its survival value, when extreme and persistent, shame is associated with a wide range of maladaptive processes, some of which are recognized precursors of depression, such as entrapment and defeat, and with psychopathological and somatic symptoms. Shame may increase one's vulnerability to disease by restraining access to positive social emotional resources, compromising help seeking and disclosure, and negatively shaping the therapeutic alliance and influencing treatment adherence. So these feelings of shame that we have when not being healthy like other people, or not accomplishing the goals and dreams or the tasks, even daily tasks that we have, we could easily fall into this trap of telling ourselves, well, we're not worthy of love, or we're not capable of doing things, or, it just keeps going. It goes on and on and on. Um, as a result, sometimes we want to avoid what we're thinking or feeling, so we will create a sort of safe place, but it's not that healthy. So when we're talking about concealment or positive self-presentation, the whole fake it till you make it scenario, or you've seen the memes. um, I don't look sick, but I am. But I'm putting up a front because I don't want people to think I'm sick. But I am. But I'm. So it's a constant cycle of not, um, of trying to cover up. It's self preservation, right? Trying to cover up what we're going through so that the world doesn't see it, even though we're dealing with it. Um, these kinds of behaviors can also create a situation of not seeking out help when we need it and not following through with the help when given it. A lot of times the help doesn't work. So, I mean, if we're talking to an emotional counselor or therapist, that can be helpful in processing our feelings and emotions, definitely. But if we're seeking out medication and the medication doesn't get rid of um, the pain and fatigue and all the other symptoms that we have, then it becomes really discouraging and easy to give up. Easy to give up with listening to the doctor and trying to find solutions. Um, Fibromyalgia is very mysterious to the medical community because it's not easy to find a way to what might be causing it, and therefore there are so many varying opinions as to what can help alleviate all the symptoms. Um, in my mind, it the devastation was not not really losing what I had before. Although as a young person in my 20s, I did have a lot more energy than I did after having children. But it really it really wasn't something that I lost about myself. It was something that I never gained about myself that I wanted. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody. So the my whole life has been about striving towards finding an answer to whatever it is that is causing me so much fatigue and pain and getting rid of it because it's holding me back. Okay? That's and if the doctors don't have the answers for me, where am I going to find the answers? Um, so I couldn't give up because I could not imagine my life getting worse over time. I just I don't want my life to get worse over time. And so the constant thing inside of me was to look and keep looking and keep finding and keep looking. Um, but I can also understand how easy it is to give up when something is not working. Um, so, continuing on, crucial in the understanding of mental health and resilience, self compassion has been proposed to counteract the pernicious impact of shame, to constitute a positive resource to cope with personal shortcomings and adversity, such as that imposed by challenging medical conditions, and to act as a buffer in development of depressive symptoms. While a variety of flows and definitions have been suggested, self-compassion can be conceptualized as an attunement with one's suffering, acknowledged as a universally shared phenomenon and approached with openness and kindness, together with the motivation to act and ease it. Self-compassion is rooted in the soothing and affiliative system, a system associated with a caregiving mentality and responsible for one's ability to self regulate. Um, Yeah. How I don't know how much of that made sense to you. You know, one of the things about these types of articles is the the large words that they use that sometimes I struggle with understanding. What I'm seeing here in this paragraph is that self compassion is something that we can learn to do. For example, for ourselves. For example, if we see a child fall down and scrape their knee, we tend to want to help that child feel better. So we have a lot of different little ideas that we use in order to help the child feel better. You know, pick them up or put our arm around their shoulder and say, "It's okay, we'll clean this up, you'll feel better soon," right? But do we do that for ourselves? We're going through a flare. Do we say, "It's okay, um, it's okay, we're going to feel better soon. Let's find a way to alleviate some of this pain now"? So, you know, would a hot Epsom salt be useful? Um, One type of bath salt mix that I found to be very soothing and helpful for me is mixing equal parts Epsom salt, pink salt, and baking soda, and then scooping maybe a quarter cup of that into the hot bath, and having the bath as hot as possible until I start to sweat. And then for some reason, that alleviated some of the pain. And that, you know, that's a self compassion action. I don't always want to do things like that because well, I go back to the I'm too lazy. Or maybe I just don't really have the gumption or the motivation to do something because I have so many things I want to get done. Also, I have found a way to alleviate a lot of my pain and fatigue, so it's not as prevalent. But when it was prevalent, those baths were very therapeutic. Now, I did notice my bottom of my feet would burn a lot. Um, I now know the reason for that. If you look up oxalates, when the body is shedding oxalates, there are a lot of different symptoms, and an Epsom salt bath helps to pull oxalates out of the body. So it makes a lot of sense now to me why my feet were burning. However, I digress here. The goal is to find ways to be compassionate towards ourselves to help alleviate the flare and our mind from spiraling into more self loathing. Um, so, thinking about how we would be towards a child experiencing pain, let's work on ways to treat ourselves the same way. We are our own advocates. It's important with a chronic condition to be a self advocate. You want to be the person to take responsibility for your emotions, to take responsibility for taking good care of yourself, and soothing your emotions with self compassion instead of always looking for other people to fill that role for you. Um, the it's easy to become. I don't know if you relate to this, but I did. It's easy to become a martyr, in a sense, the woe is me, why am I feeling this way, why doesn't anybody care, until I learned about um, the difference between what I'm experiencing and what other people are experiencing. Why would I be expecting other people to understand me if they're not experiencing what I'm experiencing? So that's that is part of the logic behind me letting go of others um, being that advocate for me and me learning how to be the advocate for myself. And that made a tremendous difference in my life. It led me to become more self-sufficient in finding answers for my fibromyalgia. So, these are really important things that we want to work on because we want our fibromyalgia to get better over time instead of getting worse over time. The potential protective role of self compassion is further supported by compassion focused interventions, which have shown promising results in improving pain related outcomes. Psychological distress, a more adaptive self to self relationship and coping styles, and increased well being across different non clinical and clinical samples, including people with chronic pain and other chronic physical illnesses. Despite the sparking interest for self compassion and chronic pain research, its potential role and interrelationship with other variables remains underexplored in fibromyalgia. So uh, this supports my concern over the lack of information there is about our emotions and fibromyalgia and how they interact with each other. I believe it's really important to be upfront with ourselves about what we're feeling and to come up with solutions once we've expressed the emotions that we have connected to our fibromyalgia. Um, wouldn't you say we're angry that we have this condition and that there doesn't seem to be real solutions? Yeah. Do we feel guilt and shame to be angry? I I usually do. It could be my upbringing or my belief system. I don't want to believe that it's okay to be angry. I don't like uncomfortable feelings. I like, fun and happy and easy and that. But coming to terms with my fibromyalgia and then accepting myself as I am with fibromyalgia and then coming up with, well, what can I do about it? Because if there's nothing I can do about it, there's no hope, right? But if I cling to some hope and there is something I can do about it, then I want to find out what that is. Um, uh, it's, I think it's important to have these discussions, and if we can create a support group where we can have these discussions and express these frustrations that we have, which is another form of anger, yes, um, then it will open us up to finding solutions because now we've brought out the emotions that we're holding inside out to the forefront and clearing, clearing the path to say, okay, I'm angry. Now, what can I do about it? Okay, I think that's important. It's easy to miss because we're trying to mask all the symptoms. But if we're neglecting our emotional health, then we're missing a really big opportunity um, to another factor of healing our fibromyalgia, and that would be healing our mind on fibromyalgia. The twofold aims of the present study in people with fibromyalgia was to get insight into the potential relevance of external shame as a threat fostering depressive symptoms, and the health protective role of self-compassion in case of external shame. To that aim, we postulated simple mediation and moderation models, including fibromyalgia symptom severity as an independent variable, depressive symptoms as the dependent variable, and external shame as a mediator and self compassion as a moderator of the shame depression link. Our hypotheses were one, that fibromyalgia severity is significantly associated with depressive symptoms, both directly and indirectly through external shame, and two, the association between external shame and depressive symptoms varies as a function of compassionate self-responding levels, with greater self-compassion being associated with a weaker association between shame and depressive symptoms. That's a lot of words just to say um, the observation and belief is that the response that we have to fibromyalgia is shame, and then shame interacts with our emotions and causes our fibromyalgia to worsen. If we could change our reaction to fibromyalgia into self-compassion, then the possibility of alleviating the self-deprecation becomes greater. And if we can alleviate that negative thinking, then we can lessen the impact that fibromyalgia has on us. I mean, is that true? Will it lessen the pain and fatigue, or will it give us a sense of peace about it? I don't know. I remember laying in bed accepting my fibromyalgia and my condition, even though I didn't feel like anybody else did. And telling myself, it's going to be okay. I'm going to get through this day, and tomorrow I'll feel better. But the fibromyalgia never went away, and my goal is to make it go away. Will I ever reach that goal? I'm like 95% there, I think. We'll see. Methods. This is always important to read when you're looking at a study. What are the methods behind the study, and will this study actually have results that are worth depending on? Because if their methods of doing the study is questionable, then the outcomes could be questionable. So the participants and procedures. This was a cross-sectional study conducted on a sample of 138 women with fibromyalgia. Participants were recruited online through two patients' associations and an online institute for people with fibromyalgia using non-probability convenience sampling. Inclusion criteria comprised of an established diagnosis of fibromyalgia, self-report, being aged between 18 and 65 years, and being able to read and write Portuguese. Oh, interesting. I forgot it was done in Portugal. Information about the study's objectives, eligibility criteria, and voluntary nature of participation was provided to participants. Data confidentiality and anonymous anonymity sorry were guaranteed. Informed consent was obtained from all participants before entering the study. The assessment protocol was administered through the online tool Lime Survey. Interesting. And took approximately 30 minutes to complete. 30 minutes. I think I would have wanted that to be longer, but I guess there has to be some kind of strike a balance between, well, what would participants be willing to do, for how long a survey would take to do. Um, hmm, Interesting. Maybe a follow up study with those interested in completing something longer. Maybe it wasn't necessary. Um, Participants did not receive any compensation for their participation in the study. The present study was approved by the Ethics Committee of the University of Coimbra, Portugal, and followed all ethical requirements. All right, so self reporting folks with fibromyalgia, well, women with fibromyalgia, and of different ages. So there's variety in the sampling, and a variety of questions for them to answer. So I don't know if this will have some of those questions. It'd be interesting to find out if this article has a sample of a few of those questions. Because if it does, that would be a good exercise for us to answer those questions. And so let's find out. The online questionnaire included socio-demographic and clinical data comprising of age, education, marital status, working status, socioeconomic level, age of first symptoms, age of diagnosis, who performed the diagnosis, comorbidities, and current medication intake. 4 self report questionnaires were included. Okay, here we go. One was called Other as Shamer Scale 2. Other as Shamer. Outside shame sources, family members, friends, coworkers, neighbors, everybody else that we think is thinking of us. You know what they say in psychology is if we're obsessing about what other people think of us, however, other people are really thinking of themselves and obsessing about what other people think of them. So we might feel the shame within ourselves, which is something I talked about on the last video. However, we will reflect that onto others and believe that they're thinking the same thoughts about us that we are thinking about ourselves. It's not until somebody actually says something to you that would validate whether or not they shame you. And I don't think I really had anybody in my life who verbally said something. My former spouse did mention his frustration with me that I didn't stick to any particular plan from the doctor in order to get better. And that led me to believe that he was comparing me to other people who say they have fibromyalgia and take medication and they're just fine. Hello. Okay. So I'm not sure how to process that, except medication to me is somewhat dangerous. So, me finding a natural way to get out of this hole was more important to me than taking medication to mask the symptoms that will never go away, because the medication is not made for fibromyalgia. It's made for depressive disorders, right? Cymbalta is a anticonvulsant. Wellbutrin is an antidepressant. The hope behind um, the hope behind uh, giving these medications to us is to alleviate the depression. And if we alleviate the depression, maybe alleviate the pain and fatigue. Well, I mean, this study is about self-compassion to help combat our negativity to in order to alleviate fibromyalgia symptoms. So, you know, they're still thinking that depression is causing, but it's something that is in conjunction. Does depression cause the fibromyalgia? No. Does the fibromyalgia cause the depression? Possibly. Is it always depression though? No. I mean, we have we have emotions, and we're tired, and we hurt, and we have emotions. Just because we have emotions, but we don't have the energy to express them and push on and get through the day, doesn't mean that we're severely depressed. It just means that we're angry that we can't get up and do the things that we want to do. We want to live life, we want to enjoy life, and we're angry about it. Why does that mean we're depressed? And what is this medication going to do to alleviate my anger? I took, I was prescribed Zoloft. Oh my gosh, that's a horrible medication. 3 months into Zoloft, and I was having temper tantrums. So, and rightly so, because I was in a relationship with a person who didn't want to be faithful, and that hurt. And I was facing my anger, right? I was facing the situation, but I didn't like being that angry. So I told my doctor, I need to get off of this. And then and then I'm tapering off of it, and I'm having electrical shocks going through my brain. I'm like, oh my gosh, what's that? I mean, it was like zapping. Oh, yeah, no. Mm-mm. Wellbutrin is a more moderate medicine, pretty much the same thing, but um, can actually cause somebody to become more depressed, which is an interesting thing. So if it's not a serotonin issue in the brain, then why are we taking medication to deal with a serotonin issue in the brain? Is there a way to measure serotonin in the brain? That's, that's my question. Is there, if you can measure serotonin, if you can measure um, dopamine, if you could measure these neurotransmitters in our brains and see that we have healthy amounts and we still have pain and fatigue, then you can conclude that it's not the lack of serotonin causing the pain and fatigue, and therefore giving us medication for that makes zero sense. But I don't I don't think there's a way to do that. I don't I don't know. I That'd be interesting to look up. I think I'll research that. But I don't think there's a way to do that. Okay. Um sorry. The other Shamer Scale 2 test, a shorter version of the OAS. I'm not really sure. Oh, that's other as Shamer Scale. It's probably an hour long. This scale is designed to measure one's perception of existing negativity in the mind of others. It comprises 8 items rated using a 5-point Likert scale. 0 equals never to 4 equals almost always, with higher scores indicating greater levels of external shame. Examples of items include other people see me as small and insignificant. Oh, good, there's a question. Do you believe other people see you as small and insignificant? And on a scale of 0 to 5, where would you put yourself? Um, in my mind, it is a belief I have. But I would not say that anybody has told me that. So how would I know? Maybe it's because I see myself as small and insignificant. Another one, other people see me as not measuring up to them. So, do you have that issue as well? Do you think that other people, let's try this again. Other people see me as not measuring up to them on a scale of 0 to 5. Now, in my previous marriage, at that time, I would have definitely said a 5 because of the things that were said to me. And it might have been out of concern because I wasn't measuring up to anybody. I was tired. I was thought of as lazy. I was full of pain. I didn't have answers, and I wasn't following doctor's directions. And that created a burden for the other people in my life that I wish I could take back, and I wish that they could have understood better. However, if they're not capable of compassion towards somebody that they perceive as lazy, then what can I do about it? I had to let that person go. And it was a very painful process because it created another scenario. Well, that proves it. I'm unlovable. I'm unwanted. Yeah, those are painful thoughts. The OAS 2, which is this particular Shamer scale, showed strong correlations with the extended version of the scale and good psychometric properties, including good internal consistency. The scale's internal consistency in the study was excellent. So I guess 82% of the test takers on the longer scale versus 94% on the shorter scale. So this is a really strong component to shame and guilt and self-loathing with fibromyalgia is what we believe other people think of us based on their behavior, based on what they've said to us, or based on what we think of ourselves, right? All right, the self-compassion scale short form is a brief version of the regular self compassion scale used to measure the quality of relating kindly and compassionately to oneself. The instrument comprises 12 items rated on a 5-point Likert scale. 1 equals never, 5 equals always. While different factor solutions have been proposed, we decided to use the two-factor solution, encompassing the factors critical self and compassionate self. The compassionate self responding subscale includes items such as when something upsets me, I try to keep my emotions in balance. True or false? I think that's what they're saying. That they only had the 1 or the 5. I don't like scales. That could be the autism in me. I'm so black and white. It's either this or that. um what's this shady gray area? I don't understand that. I just don't. Okay, so let's answer that question for ourselves. When something upsets me, I try to keep my emotions in balance. Um, so I would say before the carnivore diet, when something upset me, it affected me into either anger or resulting in crying. That's really hard. And when you're in the midst of anger or crying, um, you're not thinking about keeping your emotions in balance. Now, after carnivore, I didn't have those kinds of responses anymore. So for like 4 years now, unless I'm cheating and going back to carby food, which I do over the holidays, and I noticed my emotions going hog wild again. um, which is interesting. When your brain is using carbohydrates for energy, um, it also messes up your emotional responses, it turns out. But when your brain is on ketones, it organizes that and keeps your emotions calm. So now I'm able to think through my anger and my responses and think about, well, what can I do about it? So I don't know. This would be really hard for me to overcome without some type of intervention, right? Um, I used to write in journals, and every once in a while I'll find a journal that I've kept and I'll be like, oh my gosh, and tear out all the pages and rip it up and throw it away. Because it's hard for me to look back at those thoughts that I had. What does it mean to keep my emotions in balance? Well, it means that I'm not crying all the time or having angry outbursts all the time. It means that I can think clearly about my problems and find a way to soothe my emotions with better thoughts, right? Um, excuse me. Sorry, I get a runny nose pretty regularly. Let's see. How about this one? I try to see my failings as part of the human condition. um, everybody fails. Some people are better at covering that up. Um, I think nowadays, when I fail at something, it's usually at work. Um, but I will still have that down feeling. I want to do better. Um, a little bit of anxiety with it. But I am finding myself to be able to say, I make mistakes, and I'm always going to make mistakes, and I really don't know how to avoid them in the future, whatever my future mistakes are going to be. How am I going to avoid that if I don't know what I'm doing? This is part of how I learn, is by making mistakes. Um, but that's my brain on carnivore. My brain on carbohydrates was a lot different. It was definitely, um, oh, I did a terrible thing. Now my coworker is this and my coworker's that, and that was just awful, and I need to remember not to do that again, and da 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 da, and just a constantly down on myself for that. So, on the other hand, the items composing the uncompassionate self-responding subscale include: I'm disapproving and judgmental about my own flaws and inadequacies. Right. Wow, I score really high on that. I am very disapproving and judgmental about my flaws and inadequacies. I don't like to have flaws, and I don't like to have inadequacies. Why? Everybody has flaws. Everybody has inadequacies. So if everybody has flaws and inadequacies, why am I judging myself more harshly than I judge others? Why? Why am I treating myself any differently? Do I want to change what I feel to be, what I believe to be inadequate in me? Do I want to improve those things? Um, am I associating these things with whether or not I'm lovable? Um, this is where a therapist can come in really handy if you're feeling these things. If you happen to have a job that provides online therapy, like, 6 to 8 sessions a year, I highly recommend that you seek that out. Um, if you don't, I highly recommend that you find maybe a mentor or a counselor or somebody to be able to express these thoughts and feelings with them and learn how to not feel that way. There are a couple of people online that I have found to be somewhat helpful and useful, as far as like YouTube, since you're watching me on YouTube. If you put in the search bar, oh, it's called Therapy in a Nutshell. Therapy in a Nutshell. She has a just uh, so many topics and videos out, and they're short and precise and very practical ways to handle your thoughts and emotions. And I suggest it. A great way to learn self compassion is learning new skills on how to think when you're starting down the road of depressive thoughts. Let's see. Here's another one. When I fail at something that's important to me, I tend to feel alone in my failure. On a scale of zero, or I'm sorry, one as never and five as always. Um, I'm still like 3 or 4 with that. There were many days where I was just constantly five, five. I'm the only one in this household that cannot do X. Right. I cannot do anything right. Have you ever said that to you? I can't do anything right. Nobody loves. Oh, wow, it's such a hard time to deal with. Such a hard time to deal with. And let me just reassure you. Oh my gosh, I want to cry. Um, you're not alone. You're not alone in this. You you can have a community of people with going through this with you. And if you want to participate in building a community with me, I would love that. I would love more people to subscribe and comment so that we can be a community of compassion towards one another and teach each other these self compassion things and to deal with our real struggles and learn how to overcome them. I think it's important to believe and have hope and learn ways to overcome the struggles we're facing. You don't want to be this way. So you're not alone. Um, for the purpose of this study, only the compassionate self responding factor was used, for which an excellent internal consistency of 91% was found. Huh. So I'm not really sure which way that was. I don't understand what it means to have the internal consistency. Maybe it has something to do with predicting the answers to these questions. A person with fibromyalgia is going to say 5 on this and 1 on that. Okay, that's what that is. All right, the fibromyalgia impact questionnaire revised to make it shorter encompasses 21 items organized into 3 domains: function, the difficulty in brush or comb hair, or the difficulty in preparing a homemade meal. The overall impact, feeling completely overwhelmed by fibromyalgia symptoms. Oh, yeah. Yeah, how often do you feel overwhelmed by your symptoms? And severity of symptoms, like the pain, sleep, fatigue, IBS is another one. I think migraines has something to do with fibromyalgia. Um, a lot of different it, a lot of different areas in our body hurt because of fibromyalgia. Participants rate each item using a 0 to 10 numeric scale in an increasing degree of severity, and the past week as a time frame. So they want to keep the pain and fatigue symptoms relevant to their process of thinking for the moment, and that's pretty smart to verify a correlation. Is this person experiencing a flare? And with the flare, are there answers to these other questions relating to the flare? So that's pretty good. Yeah, I like that. Let's see. An overall score can be computed through the weighted sum of the 3 domains, with higher scores indicating greater fibromyalgia severity. The following cutoff points were considered to interpret this overall score. Values of less than 23 and greater than 23 and less than 40 are mild. Values greater than 40 and less than 63 are moderate. Values greater than 63 and less than 82 are severe, and values greater than 82 are very severe. In the present study, the main analysis only used the symptoms domain. And I don't understand A equals 88%. To avoid some degree of overlap and consequent overestimation of the model, the symptoms pertaining to psychological distress, depression, and anxiety were excluded from the symptom domain score. This change did not alter the adequacy of the subscale's internal consistency. Well, and I could understand why they would want to separate that out, because the whole study is about depression and anxiety, in particular, the shame versus self-compassion aspect. So we just want to score the other symptoms of fibromyalgia, separating out any of the emotional aspects of fibromyalgia. Okay, the hospital anxiety and depression scale was applied. For this study, only the depression subscale was used to evaluate the severity of depressive symptoms in the past week. It includes depression items rated on a 0 to 3 Likert scale. An example of an item is, I feel as if I am slowed down. I feel as if I am slowed down. Because there's no energy? Okay. The interpretation of scores for depression is 0 to 7 normative, 8 to 10 mild, 11 to 14 moderate, and 15 to 21 severe. The original and Portuguese versions presented good psychometric properties, including good internal consistency values and high temporal stability. So for these scientists doing the study, it's really important that these questionnaires meet their metrics for reliability. So I appreciate that they are looking for a certain metric score in order to substantiate the outcomes they have. All right, analytic strategy. Statistical procedures were performed with particular software, blah, blah, blah. So they're collecting everything. I don't really want to read all of that. Let's go through the results. Well, I'm looking at this chart, and already I don't really understand anything I'm looking at. I'm not that much of a scientist. But we've got everything, age, education, everything like this. Preliminary analysis showed that the absolute and z values of skewness and kurtosis were acceptable. So they are saying that they think everything showed as expected. So characterization of the variables. Let's see. Means and standard deviations were computed for each variable and are displayed, reflecting a severe impact of fibromyalgia. Depressive symptoms in turn were mild on average, and shame levels were greater than those found in the reference Portuguese population. Mean scores for self-compassion were low and similar to those reported previously for this condition. Interesting. So I guess what this is saying is if their symptoms were mild to severe, their shame levels were great and their self-compassion levels were low. Answers were low. So it was predictable, and I guess they just wanted to bring this out to the open. Let's see. Significant weak to moderate associations were found between fibromyalgia severity and external shame and depressive symptoms. External shame and compassionate self-responding were significantly associated with depressive symptoms with similar magnitude but in opposite directions. Well, this just shows how complicated the human brain is, right? We are complicated humans. We're complicated beings. A conclusion: compassionate self responding as a potential moderator of the link between external shame and depressive symptoms. So I can already see this. This significant interaction indicates that the association between external shame and depressive symptoms varies as a function of levels of self compassionate responding. So, the more self compassionate you are, the easier it is for you to deal with um, other people shaming you. I'm wondering though, do you actually have people in your life who are shaming you? Or do you believe that they have these shame thoughts against you because you have them against yourself? I do agree that if we can um, be more self compassionate and be more of an advocate for ourselves, we can help ourselves better with these thoughts of shame and guilt that comes with fibromyalgia. Um, here's I'm gonna just skip through. Here's a really important paragraph I'll read through. Self compassion has been proposed to counteract the malignant impact of shame. We examine whether this could also be the case in fibromyalgia. Although associations between self compassion and depressive symptoms uniformly suggest that compassionate self responding may protect against depression, this inference from a cross sectional observation is only tentative. It is an inherent problem with self report measures that they contain a substantial pervasive mood disposition of negative affectivity. Moreover, other influences may cause this association, including the impact of depression on compassionate self responding, influences of third factors such as attachment or childhood adversities, as well as construct over item overlap and response tendencies. Um, Our study gave a stronger indication that compassionate self responding might protect against depression in the moderator analysis because this analysis at least partly adjusts for covariances reflecting negative affectivity and response tendencies. Overall, these findings support the fibromyalgia imbalance of threat and soothing systems model that postulates the importance of considering the balance between overactive threat system and an underactive soothing system in fibromyalgia. Fibromyalgia symptoms, shame and depressive symptoms may contribute to the continuous activation of the threat system, whereas self-compassion as part of the soothing system may dampen the nefarious consequences of such threat-related activation. Mindfulness and compassion based approaches cultivate a warm, kind, compassionate, self to self relationship, helping people with fibromyalgia develop a sense of safeness, regulating physiological reactivity, and reducing self directed negative affectivity, and perceived invalidation from others. Okay, this, I think I would agree with what's being said here. Um, the the overactive threat system they're talking about is, um, so you perceive danger. What is your response to danger? Um, do you try to fight it? Do you try to run away from it, or do you try to hide, which is similar? Or I guess it was freeze. So think of yourself. Are you a lion? Are you a deer? That would be freeze. Or I would say, are you a bug? You run and hide. You run away. Um, I learned, when it comes to a threat, that I freeze. I'm the deer in the headlights. And also that the stress of a threat creates more of a problem with health, with the feeling of fibromyalgia. So constantly living in the constant stress of dealing with bad things happening. Self-soothing can be an avenue to alleviate that stress, fight, flight, freeze mode, and actually help to soothe instead of um, causing all those different responses in the body that could um, make our fibromyalgia symptoms worse. So that would be a really important thing to have a discussion about. I am done with this article. I've talked long enough, and I want to wish you well with everything that you do this week in your journey to find solutions for your fibromyalgia. If you want to know more about eating carnivore, I suggest that you look up Dr. Anthony Chaffee and the carnivore diet. Also, let's see, Dr. Ken Berry has a lot of great information. Both he and his wife work together on YouTube to provide a lot of information about ketogenic diets and carnivore. And yeah, get your brain healthy by eating less carbohydrates. That would be a real important help. All right, have a great week. Bye.
Well, I'm on the winning side. Yes, I'm on the winning side. Out in sin, no more will I abide. I've enlisted in the fight for the cause of truth and right. Praise the Lord, I'm on the winning side.